Good to see everybody. I'm going to lead with a disclaimer. Today's conversation is 100% fueled and brought to you by Sudafed. I've been battling a sinus infection for the last 2 weeks, so I sound far worse than I feel. If we have an exchange in the hallway and we like shake hands or we hug or we do something, I promise you will not get sick, probably. I've been on antibiotics for about 2 weeks. I'm starting to feel a lot better. So if at any point during today's conversation I start to look, sound, or come off like I'm having a stroke, that's just a Sudafed moment. It's completely normal. It's fine. I'll get through it, and we'll make our way through the rest of the talk. Cool?
Yes.
Disclaimer out of the way. Okay, where are my 80s kids at? And I mean there we go, my true 80s kids, right? You'd wake up Saturday morning, you'd go outside, and you would pretend that you were whooping some Foot Clan ass, and then you'd follow that up with a full day of Contra. Show of hands. That's pretty good. So being a byproduct of the 80s myself, I'm proud to bring this nostalgic piece of technology today. Who remembers this? Right? This is the Talk Boy, Home Alone 2. And we all remember that cinematic classic, right? That was a gem from my youth. I played with this thing far more than I should have. It got me into a lot of trouble. And we all remember how this got into popularity, right? It was this piece of technology that allowed Kevin McCallister to thwart the Wet Bandits in his trip to New York that was unexpected. And we all remember that story arc, right? A year before, Kevin McCallister and family's prepping for their trip to Paris. Kevin gets all spun up because Fuller's in the corner pounding liters of Pepsi. They got the rubber sheets ready to rock and roll, and Kevin gets pissed. And he starts acting up, and then he wishes family would disappear, and then they do, right? Then a year later, they're getting ready to try again and go to Florida, and they're all making jokes about the last year, like that was not like some scenario that Health and Human Services should have showed up to, right? So this piece of technology was awesome at the time. It's still really cool. And like I said, I played with this thing a lot, and growing up, I never thought that I would almost live a Kevin McCallister experience for myself. But I did. So check this out. Like 2 months ago, my CMO, Davey Owens, he moved here, I say here, Lincoln, from Seattle a little over a year ago to work at Evil. And his fiance at the time, also from Seattle. So 2 months ago, they're getting ready to have their wedding in Seattle. My wife and I are flying out there to be a part of the wedding. And my wife is finishing her doctorate, so her schedule's banana nutty. We got 3 kids. There was a lot of balls to juggle there. And so my flight was going to leave a couple days before hers. We were going to come back on the same day. Kids weren't coming, so we wanted to have like a really nice hotel downtown Seattle. And after looking on the website, it's like, there's way too many variables here, right? Let's outsource. So we call a travel agency, thinking let's not mess with it. Let's let them do what they do. We don't have to fact check this. It's just one done credit card, and we're on our way, in theory. So I call the travel company and I say, hey, these dates, here's what we're doing, flying from Lincoln, Nebraska to Seattle, Washington. Cool? Okay. So we book it, we pay for it, off we go. The night before the trip, Davey shoots me a text. Hey bro, shoot me your itinerary, super excited to see you. I will pick you up from the airport, and I'll show you around Seattle, take you to my favorite spots. It's gonna be great. So I email him the itinerary, and then I go to bed. Because my flight leaves super early, it was like a 3 a.m. wake-up call. And so I fire off the email, go to sleep, and I wake up to a slew of text messages from Davey, right? Abort, do not get on that airplane, this is bad, like you cannot do this. And if you understand our culture, if you ever come to Evil, I know a couple of you here have been there, you'll know that we have a lot of practical jokes in our office, right? So I'm thinking this is Davey's way of just screwing with me. So my response, I don't remember verbatim, but it was something along the lines of, don't mess with me, probably more profanity, I'll see you in a bit, and you know, off to start my day. Then my wife comes into the bathroom and she says, I got a lot of messages from David, we should probably check that itinerary. So I open up the email, and we discover that the travel agent had booked us not to go to Seattle, Washington, but to Washington, D.C. Right? So in terms of error or erroneous data, that's the biggest error they could have made while keeping us in the continental United States. Okay, so I've got like 2 hours before I gotta leave. So I pick up the phone, I'm calling the travel company, and I explain this story to like 5 different people. I kid you not, all 5 of them did not see the error in this. It's like none of them owned a map. They did not know that these were on the opposite coasts. Right? I legitimately had one of them say, why can't you just Uber from the airport to the hotel? Cool, you're gonna cover that? Like, that's an expensive Uber. So long story short, I get my flight fixed. We get my wife's flight fixed. We get a new hotel. The kicker is they won't refund the original trip. Now this is just me bitching at this point. They won't refund the original trip, right? Because there's no way to prove whether I told them the wrong side of the country or the agent screwed up. So we paid for that trip, the first one. We paid for the updated trip. So for about the following week, I'm on the phone about an hour every day, working through customer service, trying to get to the right person, and it's just a constant string of ominous drone on the other end of the phone. And I can just like hear and feel the pain, right? And I've been in those environments before. I've actually worked in a call center years ago. I've talked at call centers, and like if you've ever been there or been a part of them, a lot of them have pretty de facto cultures, right? And I'm stereotyping at this point, but I apologize. I'm glad it happened though. Like in the thick of it, I saw red, I was pissed. It was a very, very, very stressful week. Probably not good for my liver. But in the end, I'm really glad that I did it, or that I went through that, because it was a solid reaffirmation that the culture we've created at Evil is spot on for what we're doing and for the humans that we're working with, right? So I'm the founder and CEO of Evil Empire Creative in Lincoln, Nebraska. Evil spelled E-V-O-L, it's love backwards. We're very passion driven, and we are damn proud of our culture. We've won awards for our culture. That's not me bragging, that's not an ego thing. What I'm doing is just letting you know that what we're going to talk about today is the formula that we've implemented at Evil for culture. Okay? Here's the second disclaimer. I'm not up here saying that if you do these 4 things, your culture's going to hockey stick. Okay? I'm not up here saying that if you implement these 4 things, you're going to see an overnight change and everybody's going to be happy and it's going to be rainbows and unicorn farts. Not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you find value in any one of these core tenets that have worked for us and you can implement them and you can see progress, then I've done my job. Because the core values that work for us because we have a very specific group of people. My culture is going to be different than yours, going to be different than yours. So it's my hope that you'll be able to get the underlying kernel of truth from each core value and apply it where you can. Okay? So show of hands. How many of us in here are entrepreneurs, business owners, or leaders in your organization? Cool. This is perfect because I tailored our talk to you. If you're not operating in that capacity, it's still a good talk. Don't worry. But I've really geared it to you. So, when we say culture of hustle at Evil, what we mean is creating a symbiotic unit of human beings that work cohesively together to accomplish a common goal, but with a ferocity that emulates everybody being willing to drop kick the competition in the back of their face like Chuck Norris, right? Like just a really tight group of people who care about what they're doing. And the formula that we've created is this: celebrating failure, making uncomfortable your new comfortable, knowing the need, and expecting exceptional experiences. That one's a mouthful, a lot of E's. If it's Wheel of Fortune, by that vowel. I fell in love with culture about 10 years ago. I was working at Electronic Arts out in Florida. I was working at the Tiburon studio, working on titles like Tiger Woods and Madden and FIFA and Army of Two. And if you're familiar with that world at all, they have a pretty bad rep for overworking their employees. I can tell you, having worked on the inside, I have never experienced culture on that level. That company, like, yeah, when we were in beta, we were getting ready to ship a title. It was 80 hours a week. But we were all there because we wanted that product to be as best as it possibly could be. But as far as culture goes, I've never worked inside a company that invested that amount of time, money, resources, and energy into making sure that the people that were working on these projects were taken care of. So that's where I fell in love with culture, and then over the course of the next 10 years, I was implementing it as I went, right? Working in different jobs, different leadership positions, implementing pieces of this in the Denver agency that I owned. We'll talk through that. But it wasn't until Evil that these 4 core tenets really started to shine and become their own pillars or tenets. Okay? So we're going to talk through these 4. I talk very fast. I drink a lot of coffee, so if you have questions or you need me to just pump the brakes a bit, just holler at me and we'll be good. Okay? So, celebrating failure. This one can throw a lot of people off. I talk about this a lot, I write about this a lot, and I get asked a lot of questions with respect to, isn't this setting the stage for creating excuses? Does this mean you never have to fire somebody again? Does this mean that you will never have to have hard conversations? No, it's the opposite, okay? Celebrating failure, you have to look at failure through a different lens, right? Every single one of you, me included, in this room, you are going to fail. You are going to fail at business. You are going to fail on projects. You are going to fail as a leader. You are going to fail as a human being. That is the reality of life. It's what you do with the data that comes out of that experience that matters, right? There's 2 paths there. Make excuses, don't pay attention to what happened, don't learn anything, or actually view that as an opportunity for personal growth and career development. Right? So when we say celebrating failure, this explanation is going to be a little like a Quentin Tarantino film. We're going to kind of start backwards. Right? We're going to start with why, I love that book, and we're going to kind of walk through the steps. So why you want to celebrate failure is it sets the ground for you to better manage failure and chaos when you encounter those situations again. So here's a story to bring some context to this. In September-ish of last year, Evil landed the biggest account that we had locked in at that time. We were still a baby. And that account on an annual basis was worth just under $500,000, right? Solid account. Good Friday. Had some beers. We are very relationship focused with our clients and our team at Evil. We have great deliverables. We have great process. Our process is very different now. But the problem with this account was we assumed the level of relationship and interaction that the client was expecting. So shame on us, right? So a month, 2 months go by, we think everything's great until we get the phone call on a Friday night and we were fired. And then that weekend was a whirlwind of chaos with my leadership team trying to figure out, can we save this? How do we pivot out of this? We hired people around this. Does this affect us making payroll, right? Like all of the shit that we all think about as entrepreneurs when something goes wrong, right? So I can look at that moment in Evil's history and I can pinpoint that being one of the best moments for our agency. It sucked. It was a kick in the ass, but it was the best one we ever had. And here's why. The next steps of celebrating failure immediately went into play, okay? So, public celebration, what I mean by that is after failure occurs, okay, and after we go through the 2 steps, introspective analysis and deploy systems that we're going to talk about in a second, I encourage you to do this. Public celebration is not like when Michael Scott declared bankruptcy, right? We all remember that? It's not like that. What that means is openly sharing with your leadership team, with your company, with your key players, whoever needs to know what happened. Where did you go wrong? What could have been done differently to avoid or prevent this from happening? So what we did in this scenario was that Monday, I held a company meeting and I explained exactly where we went wrong. We are very transparent at Evil. Everybody knows how much money we make every month, what it costs to run our agency. So everybody knew the potential negative side effects of this, but then the also possible upswing because of the other 2 pieces. Okay? So public celebration really means just being transparent with the people that you're working with on a daily basis. So the 2 pieces we need to understand would be introspective analysis and deploy systems. So introspective analysis, I'm going to assume that you work in a vertical hierarchy. Okay? And if you don't, if you're horizontal, that's great, and there's ways to apply this. We can talk about it afterwards. But vertical hierarchy. And I'm going to assume that you are at the top. When failure occurs, it is so easy for us as human beings or as leaders to find fault in others or point the finger. And that sucks. That happens all the time, and I've been on both sides of it. I've done that myself, and I feel like just a terrible human being, and I've caught the other side of that, and that sucks too. So when I say introspective analysis, the process that you should go through, easier said than done, but you should go through, is start with yourself. Look at the overall failure and figure out, where did I go wrong? Was this a lack of direction that I gave my team? Did I not set clear expectations? Was there not clear deadlines, right? Were the deliverables not solid? Like, what did I do that could potentially have caused this to fail? And you will find in that process, more times than not, there's probably some stuff with respect to your leadership that warrants opportunity for growth. From there, you work your way through your organization, okay? Not to point fingers or blame, but I want you to find gaps in your process, okay? How many of you in here subscribe to Agile methodologies or Scrum, right? We know Scrum works because it's transparent. And when you work in this manner, top down, and you find these gaps, it allows you to understand where your system is broken. And that leads us to our next point. Deploying systems, right? Systems take a long time to develop, they take a long time to perfect, and they take a long time to deploy effectively and efficiently. But if you introspectively analyze what's broken, this will lead to systems being developed to help you better manage this situation or avoid it in the future, right? A lot of this seems like common sense, and it is. But the amount of times I've talked to business owners, or I've talked at different speaking engagements or whatnot, a lot of this is ignored, and that sucks. So, introspectively analyzing what happened leads to deploying systems, which leads to public celebration, which leads to you being able to better manage failure. Right? So it's kind of some Quentin Tarantino stuff there. A lot of moving parts, I apologize. But that's celebrating failure. Okay? Clear? Good? All right. So let's move to making uncomfortable your new comfortable. And we've all heard this, right? Everybody, the best things in life, you have to step out of your comfort zone. If you want success, you got to do what you're not comfortable doing. A million times. I feel like every time this is talked about, there's a serious lack of how do you actually execute following up with that. So, when we say making uncomfortable your new comfortable, we can put some context behind this with the story as well. Evil is my second agency. I founded an agency in Denver, Colorado in 2012. My wife and I started that in our basement. We scaled the hell out of it. It is still down on 14th and Market, right by 16th Street Mall, if you're familiar with Denver. We brought on 3 partners early on in the process. And it was at the end of 2015, for a lot of reasons, we're not going to get into that today, we decided it was time to make our exodus from the agency and leave Denver. You know, we have 3 kids, so pace of life in Denver is a lot different than Lincoln. So there was, like I said, there was a lot of variables that led to this. But I ultimately had to hold that board meeting and have that conversation with, here is why I'm unhappy, and here is why I'm going to be selling my shares back to the company. And that, honestly, aside from that conversation being hard, was really hard for me emotionally, because that agency was my baby. I walked away from corporate America. That was the first time I took that jump, right? And I'm sure you all remember when you left the security of the job and the paycheck to become an entrepreneur with all the unknowns. That's scary, right? So there was a lot of ego that I had to battle, and there was a lot of just emotion tied to that conversation. That was probably the hardest conversation I've ever had. And that actually, what followed that was not graceful at all. I mean, it was a long, nasty breakup. Everybody lawyered up. But coming out of that, understanding the silver lining, I can look at any hard conversation that I have to have now and know that I feel like I've probably experienced the worst at this point, right? Which is awesome when you know how to leverage that, right? It doesn't mean that I enjoy hard conversations. It doesn't mean I enjoy firing people, if that's the case. It's the opposite. But I feel like I'm now equipped to have those conversations because I viewed this as an opportunity for personal growth and career growth, right? So the steps that I'll outline for you are as follows. Show up, right? If you show up, you've already bested 50% of the people out there, Most people will justify to themselves why they shouldn't do something that's uncomfortable, why they shouldn't do something that's scary, why they should not leave their job to start a company, right? So if you show up, you've already done 50% more, or more than 50% of the people we're talking about. So show up. 2 is push through, okay? It's going to be hard. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to suck, right? But if you push through, you're going to be able to see exponential growth on a personal level and on a career level. When I had that conversation with my ex-partners, there was definitely the conversation of reworking my role within the company to make sure that the issues that I was having and what was unraveling my thread of discontent would no longer be applicable. And had I agreed to that, I would still be in Denver, and I would still be miserable, and I would still be running a 3-hour commute every single day, right, to get from North Denver to downtown Denver. It's stupid, right? And I can honestly say, confidently say that what we've created now is so much, it's far more rewarding than what we had in Denver for so many reasons. But had I not pushed through, I wouldn't know that, right? I would still be doing the exact same thing I was. So push through. 3 is enjoy the suck, okay? It's going to suck. There are going to be situations that are super uncomfortable, that are not fun, but if you view them through a different filter, you will see massive growth, you guys. If you view these uncomfortable situations as an opportunity to become a better leader, a better business owner, a better communicator, a better human being, you will start looking at scenarios very, very differently. Our minds are ridiculously powerful, right? How many of us can relate to this? Right? You know something is not true, but you tell yourself enough that it is true that you actually start to believe it, right? That's how powerful our minds are. So if we can change the way that we view scenarios or situations in our lives and in the marketplace, you will actually start to change the way you think. It takes time, it's habit forming, so it doesn't just happen overnight. But if you practice it enough, it will. Right? So enjoy the suck. The 4th thing, which honestly, if you take anything from this talk today, let it be this: a career journal. How many of you guys do this? Okay? 2 hands. You guys need to do this. Like I said, if there's only one thing you take from this talk today, start a career journal. And I don't care if it's a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly schedule. It's just like a content schedule, right? Create a schedule and stick to it. Our brains, again, are insanely powerful. But when we're in the thick of it, when we're in the trenches, it's hard to see how much we've grown. The last 16 months of my life have been bonkers. And without a career journal, I would not be able to look back 12 months ago and really see what was going on and see what my projected solution was and what the outcome was. And when I look back, it's like, that's so cute. It's so wet behind the ears. So here's how you should use this, in my opinion. Whenever you create an entry, you need to write down what's going on, right? What potential challenges or obstacles or potential failures are you currently facing? Then you need to write down what are you planning to do, or what do you think you should do to solve the problem. Okay? And move on. 5 minutes. When you implement your solution, come back to that page. And just jot down what happened. How'd it go? And then as a year goes by, just start revisiting these pages. Right? We know Scrum works for 2 reasons. 1, transparency. But 2, our brains work on seeing progress. The physical act of moving that card from column to column is huge for teams. Seeing progress is a big part of the way our brains work. So when you look back at these entries from last year, you will see the progress that you've made. And if it's not the progress that you want to see, well, guess what? Now you have an opportunity to fix that, which is huge, right? So again, if there's anything you take from today's conversation, let it be this. this is a very, very powerful, powerful practice for your career. Cool? Okay. Know the need. Right now the need is iced tea. So know the need. What I mean by this is really knowing who you work with. Business partnerships are hard, right? It's like a marriage. You could argue it's harder than a marriage. Typically you spend more time with that person or those people than you do at home, right? And just like any relationship, it takes work. Being a leader is hard. Managing people is hard, okay? But if you understand who you're working with or how their brains are wired up or what motivates them, you will be in a position to really lead these people in an effective way. So how many of you guys in here do monthly one-on-ones with your team members? That's pretty good, okay? How many of you that do the one-on-ones actually ask one of or many of these questions, right? What motivates you? Why are you here? What if you could do anything with your career, what would it be, right? Like, what kind of incentives are you after? Do you guys actually ask these questions to get to know your people? If you're not, you should. So I've got a guy in my organization named Cam. He's one of our front-end devs. Smart dude. And he also plays music. And his band is really taking off right now. They just made Billboard. They did main stage at Warped Tour. Like, awesome stuff. And so if I would have just assumed what was important to Cam, right? I'm 34. I have 3 kids. I have a mortgage. Like, my life is very different than his. If I had just assumed from a benefit standpoint what was important to Cam, I would have rolled out a bunch of worthless shit that he would not have cared about at all, right? But actually sitting down with him and doing the discovery, I found what is more important to him than anything else is the flexibility to be able to take his laptop and go on tour for a few weeks and work remotely on the projects he needs to get done. So now I know what motivates Cam. Now I know how to structure his day and his incentives, right? So you set goals for Cam and you say, all right, man, if you do this, then you have this. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. Right? So understanding your people on that level allows you to really motivate them on a whole new plane. Okay? Team members need 3 things: mastery, autonomy, and purpose. Okay? So with respect to mastery, how many of you guys in here actually budget for and allow for continued education on the job, daily, weekly, monthly, whatever, right? Using platforms like Treehouse or Code Academy or Linda, whatever. If you didn't raise your hand, you need to look at doing that. We need to know that we are mastering our craft, right? Not just as entrepreneurs, but as team members, or just if you're a dev or a designer, I don't care what you do, you need to know that you're making progress and you are good at what you do, because that assigns us self-worth. As silly as that sounds. Right? So for us, we have a built-in CE system at Evil that allows our people, if they have this, then they go in and they are able to work on bettering their craft. Right? So I'm not saying that you need to pay to send people all over the world to go to all these crazy conferences. If you have it in the budget, don't. If not, like, there are other ways to hack that, you guys, to make sure that your team is the best of the best. But people need to know that they are mastering their craft. Autonomy is important. We've all been micromanaged, and that sucks, right? So, I'm not saying that you let your team figure it out. That will give you the opportunity to celebrate failure, okay? I'm not telling you to just, allow chaos to happen. What I'm telling you is to set clear and defined expectations, clear and defined boundaries, deadlines, all of the things that need to go into effectively and efficiently launching a project, regardless of the medium. Set that out for your team. And it depends on how your organization is set up, whether you're resourcing or you have one person that does debt, whatever it is. Set those expectations. And then let your people do their jobs. Right? Be available. Let them ask questions. Let them know what the process is, who they need to talk to if they need X, Y, or Z, right? But give them autonomy. to know that they are mastering their craft. You will see output spike. If you are using Scrum in your agency and you also allow for autonomy, not only do you see it spike, but you will see when there's a gap in your system, right? So then you know, all right, cool, Cam needs some work on his JS, right? And without knowing this, like without this, I would not have known that. Otherwise, or I would be micromanaging at that point. So autonomy and purpose. Teams thrive. When I said at the beginning that we are a cohesive unit working towards a common goal, that's because everybody knows the purpose of evil. We all know what we stand for. We all know what our goals are financially. Where are we going? What markets are we expanding into? Like, we all know that. And everybody drinks that Kool-Aid 150%. And if you have somebody in your organization that's 99% in, get them out. That will not work. Purpose. Everybody working towards a common goal, and what drives purpose is transparency. So telling your team what you're doing and why is so huge. So ask your people what motivates them. Provide them mastery, autonomy, and purpose, and you guys will see a monstrous spike in output, quality of life, happiness quotient, whatever you want to call it. Cool? Okay. And the last core tenet is expecting exceptional experiences. You say that 5 times fast. This one is the most hippy-dippy. This is not law of attraction. Okay? We're not going to even go there. This is really looking at life through a different filter. This is looking at business through a different filter. This is looking at relationship management through a different filter. What this is understanding that every scenario that you are faced with, good, bad, or what seems meaningless, is an opportunity for growth. And if you expect that you are going to better develop your skills, whether it's good, bad, or meaningless, you have set yourself up to look at life totally different. Go back to that example I gave you with my Denver agency. If I hadn't pushed through, I'd still be there. If I hadn't expected that an exceptional experience was going to spin out of that 8 months of my life, which was, to be quite honest, the lowest point I've ever been, the most abuse to my liver ever, right? Like, it was screwed up. But had I not expected the exceptional experience or looked for the silver lining, I wouldn't be here. I would not have had something to motivate me to get me to that next point. Right? So like I said, it sounds hippy-dippy, it sounds obvious, but honestly, it's so powerful, you guys. Then you apply this experience to culture. When we spun up Evil, I say we, it was my wife, myself, and then our CMO, Davey. When we spun up Evil, we looked at, culturally, what do we need to do? From our experiences, he came from Amazon, and I had my Denver agency. Our experiences are both positive, negative. What do we want to stay away from, and what do we want to implement? And that's how, like I said, these 4 core tenets were born. So when you have these experiences, good, bad, or meaningless, apply them to your culture where they fit. Does that make sense? And then this is all cyclical. This goes back to giving you the opportunity to celebrate failure, but then also making uncomfortable your new comfortable. Right? So honestly, it's all perception, you guys. Like, we've all heard perception's reality, right? How you look at life, how you look at business, how you look at the people you work with really determines how you look at everything, how you react to everything. I mean, how we think is how we feel, unless Sudafed's on board. But it's so true. So like I said, I'm not claiming to have it figured out. I screw up all the time. I'm not claiming that we have the best culture on the face of the earth. It works for us. We are a clan of weirdos. If you ever come to Evil, like, you'll very quickly realize who we are. My goal for our talk today was that if there's anything that we talked through that was this valuable for you and you can implement it, then I am proud to say that this was a success in my eyes. So I appreciate you guys listening to my Sudafed fueled rant. I made pretty good time. We've got about 9 minutes for Q&A. Go!
All right. So as far as like general change management goes, about like this is the thing we came from, that's where we're intended to head. And so a lot of this that you're talking about is like being comfortable in that middle area.
Yeah.
And helping your teams do that, which is really hard.
For sure.
And so when you have a team that's like headed toward the new lighthouse, not sure how they're going to get there, like as far as like being able to say, this is your roadmap, look how far you've come, without sending them back to the beginning part where they're wanting to just kind of squat in resistance.
Which is their comfort zone?
Yeah,
right.
That's a really difficult needle to thread. Do you have any advice
Totally.
on how to do that?
Lead by example. Okay. I don't know how your organization's structured. Okay, but for us, we have the leadership team of myself and 3 others, and then we have our team from there. So the way that when we're going through right now is what we're calling threeval. Right, so there was Evil 1.0, which was me, Davey, and my wife. Then there was 2.0, which was when we grew to about 22 people. And then we went through this huge change where we're changing where we're going, who we're working with, what we're targeting, so on and so forth. So we're calling that threeval, affectionately. It's taken us about 4 months to really start making the changes to where it's rolling out to the team. So on a weekly basis, the leadership team was sitting down for an hour twice a week and just game planning and road mapping what needs to change, how are we going to go, where are we going to go, policy, procedure, process, all of these things. And then we're rolling them out to the team in digestible chunks, right? Where you're going to confuse people, I believe, is if you just completely flip it on its head. That's when people react, like, they're like, this is scary, changes, I don't like change. If you roll it out in digestible chunks, I've seen a lot better success with that.
Let's assume we didn't have the option to roll it out digestively. It just happened.
So we're reactive at that point.
Well, some of us are,
Mm-hmm.
I think. But is there anything?
Buckle up. So I can give you a real story. So when we started making these changes, we had 3 people in the organization that did not vibe with those changes. They liked when we were a startup. They liked when there was a lot more free time and less projects, and it was far less structured than it is now. Remember when I said if you got somebody that's 99% in, get them out.
So culture dead.
Totally, because there is nothing more detrimental to culture than cancer, and that shit spreads fast. Right, so you have to be. It sucks because you have to make those hard decisions, right? Like as a person, you care about these people. And I read like these 3, they were some of my OGs, right? And like as people, loved them to death. But what they were doing to culture was just so degrading that it was like, okay, I gotta make a decision. And so the decision basically made itself. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. Shoot.
So I'm just a baby and still just me, but I'm at the point where
Good for you. Like that's the scariest shit ever when it's like solopreneur is that's awesome. Good for you.
But I'm at the point where I do need to hire on people, and you
Awesome.
read so much of where you should just start with contractors.
Yep.
Do you recommend that, or I mean, most of this, talking about building a team, that culture, that really speaks to me too. So how do you do that with contractors?
That's going to depend on.
Do you just go straight to hire an employee?
It's going to depend on your risk adversity, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and it also depends on where you're getting these contractors and like what's your workflow look like. Like, we don't outsource at Evil, and that's been a big part of our story. Like, we hire when we have the need, and that's what we grew to 25 people very, very quickly. Now, hindsight, some freelancers or contract to hire probably would have been a little better for cash flow in the early days, but it's like you live and you learn, right? So I would look at where are you getting these people? How do you plan on running quality control, right? How are you going to communicate with these people? Are they local, or is it just like something through Upwork, right? And then really define your metrics so you know, okay, look at what you have the bandwidth to do without wanting to die. Set that boundary, and then once you get really close to that, you know, okay, I either have to hire a freelancer or contract somebody, or if there's enough work to warrant it, go find somebody full-time. If you can snag up an intern that has the skill set, like the basic skill sets, right? And we have an awesome internship to hire program that's worked well for us. So we work directly with UNL. They have web dev or web designer grads that come out of the school, and we're able to get them at an awesome rate and then train them up to be what we need. Now, that scenario requires more flexible time on your part because now you're teaching them the craft as well. But if we go back to Mastery Autonomy Purpose, right? If you have mastery as a part of your overall plan and you're allowing, let's say, 3 hours a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, just for the sake of brevity, to get better at their craft through Treehouse, okay, that frees up your time. So it's really just going to come down to your risk adversity, I think. Yeah. Cool. Shoot.
How do you apply not your values to your hiring process, your company specifically?
So we are very slow to hire, even when there's a big need, right? My CMO, our leadership team, we will take more on. Like when I just did that whole metric of want to die, like I know it's not healthy, but I've exceeded that many times because they have to be the right person. So we have a pretty intense screening process where I'm never part of the first interview. Like I'm way too easy, you guys. Like, I'm like, oh, you like the culture down, let's go. But so we have a screening process where they get through 2 other leaders, and then usually when I come in, it's just to have a conversation and offer a job. We start by looking for technical skill, right? Obviously, do you know these things? Can you do these things? From there, we start asking a lot of questions that are indicative of our culture, while also being cognizant of that line that you have to walk now legally when you're interviewing somebody, right? Because that's fun. So we hired a culture, 100%. Like we look for culture, and then technical ability right below it. Does that answer the question? Cool. Shoot.
I'm going to sell my business and come work for you. I love that you say celebrate failure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that's fantastic. And obviously, you're not a startup anymore, as you've said.
Sure.
But that's something that is fantastic about this generation of business. For years, I worked in restaurants, bars, and one of the best managers I ever had fired one of my best friends as a manager.
Yeah.
Fired him and said, "I fired you not because you made a wrong decision, but you didn't make it bold enough."
Right.
Like he was too safe with the bad decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I love that celebrate failure. Like if do it wrong and learn from it.
Right. And that's a fine line that we had talked about, where you're not creating a culture of excuses, right? Like you're still going to have to fire people. That's just business. You're still going to have hard conversations and disciplinary action. I mean, you're still going to have to do all the normal stuff. But again, it's like what you do with that data and how you apply it to the team and how the entire team can learn through a failure. Like I grew up playing video games. I worked at EA, right? So like I use the term level up on a super nerdy level. But we say it all the time at Evil. It's like we have got to continuously level up. Not just our skills, not just the markets we're playing in, but just like us as human beings. And when it comes down to celebrating failure, we've actually ran this exercise in our agency a few times. And it gets uncomfortable, which is our second part. We pair people up, and they go into their own little corner of the agency or whatever, and they vocalize when the last time they failed was. And they explain what they could have done to avoid it and what they learned from it, and then they flip roles, right? And then we all kind of come back and talk about it. Man, that sounds super kumbaya when I say it out loud. It's cool, it works, and it gets our team to trust each other, right? And that's one of the biggest things about celebrating failure and making uncomfortable comfortable is it creates a heightened level of trust. And when you have trust, like it doesn't matter if we're talking business or personal relationship or romantic, like trust is the foundation of everything, right? So if your team trusts you to lead them, guess what they're going to do? They're going to follow, right? So, glad you picked up on that though. My man, what's up? What's that?
Last question.
Cool.
Quick question. So you talked about having a whale client. And
Yeah.
This whale goes away and you really struggle. What's your guys' current strategy for balancing larger clients with smaller clients?
Oh, loaded question. Financially or like on an AM side? Or both? Okay. So the double-edged sword that is the whale, like you really have to diversify your book, right? Like you can't have, we've all seen that show Mr. Robot, right? And when they were looking at losing that client, they're like, look, we're done. Like you can't set that scenario up, right? So for every whale, you have to have X amount of smaller clients to offset that revenue. So when that goes away, because everything's finite, everything has a shelf life, so when that goes away, you're not looked at, you're not just holding the bag and like, oh my God, what do I do, right? You want to be in that scenario going, well, that sucks, but we'll be all right. So it's really working with your BD team or your sales team to understand what percentage of like SMB am I going after versus the whale clients, right? From an AM standpoint, it's making sure that you have the right people managing those relationships and how they're expected to be ran, basically. We do a lot of discovery to make sure we know what kind of touch points are you guys expecting. Like setting good expectations on the front and having your AM in that meeting, even during the pitch, really lets him or her know, okay, I got this client right here, I'm running this deal, like I know they want Monday, Wednesday, Friday correspondence, they want a monthly sit down. Like if they know that and that's their job to manage it, I've found that to be far more effective than me sitting with the client and then just communicating it on the back, because then it's a game of telephone, right? So, that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, do you have a set percentage, or do you have balance?
For us, it's going to be like 80-20, right? 20 being a whale, 80% being the smaller mid-level clients that they cash flow everything. So when you get a whale, that's a bonus, right? Like you have to have all your recurring revenue from that 80% needs to pay your overhead and then some, so you have some to hold back every single month. The whales, we just view those as like, that's cool. That's a bonus. Good month. Good deal. Cool?
All right.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. This was fun.